everyone. It's David Thompson again with Civil War Monitor's Behind the Lines series, and I'm joined today by Dr. Anne Rubin, the Associate Professor of History at University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She is the author of A Shattered Nation, The Rise and Fall of the Confederacy, 1861 to 1868, and that's out with UNC Press. But she is also the new president of the Society of Civil War Historians. So, Dr. Rubin, congratulations, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
So, why don't you give us a little bit of a sense of what the SCWH president actually does? Because I imagine there's a whole lot going on behind the scenes that we just don't know about.
It's actually, I feel like it's one of those jobs where other people seem to do a lot of the work for me, which seems very nice. It's a lot of, I think, planning for the society and thinking about what the society should be doing, and a lot of assigning people to prize committees and those sorts of things. But I have to say that at least thus far, it seems like the real work is done by Steve Engel, who's the treasurer, and Ann Bailey, who's the secretary, and then especially Bill Blair and Barbie Singer and the staff at the Richards Center at Penn State. And so, fortunately, I haven't had to do too much yet, which is nice. I get to think a lot about the society and what I think the society should be doing. It was a lot of fun to be at the conference and meet a lot of members of the society, a lot of people who I already knew, but a lot of new members who I hadn't met before, and to hear their ideas and to see all of their energy.
Now, where would you like to see the society going? This is your baby now for the next couple of years. So what types of ideas or things do you have in mind?
Where I'd like to see it going are twofold, really. I think that I'd like the society to have a voice in the ongoing conversation about the sesquicentennial, the Civil War sesquicentennial, which we're fortunate that it's 5 years long, so that even though we're 2 years into it, we've still got plenty of time for society members to participate in some way. I'm not really sure how that would be. I'm thinking maybe guest columns or something like that. But I'd like the society to take a more active role in that. And I'd like us also to have more of a digital presence and more of a social media presence. I think we're historians, we like the past, but the digital world is upon us, and I think that it's a great tool for outreach and to get the message of the society, or the messages of the society, out there to a broader public, and especially, I think, also a younger public.
And the society has grown tremendously since its inception. Do you think are we just talking about the sesquicentennial, or do you think that there's something out there that gets historians excited about a organization that's really specific, something that's a little it's less broad than, say, something like the AHA or the OAH?
I do think that historians like the size of the society because it's relatively small, because it's very focused. It's one of those conferences where you really can't decide which panel to go to because there are so many good panels, and I think the informal conversations at a conference of that size are also really important. I do think that as the AHA has grown, and the OAH, and even the Southern, which had traditionally been the conference for Civil War historians to present, because those societies have all grown, I think there is less of a place for Civil War in all of those. So it's nice to have our space to get together. I think we fit in nicely, actually, with a group of kind of second-level historical societies. I'm thinking of the Society of Military History, the Southern Association of Women Historians, Society for Historians of the Early Republic, things like that. So I think that we fit nicely into that niche. And I do think also, one of the reasons I think the society has grown, and this is one of the things I really like about the society, it's not just academics who are members. There's a lot of members who are in public history, but there are also a lot of members who, frankly, are just interested in the Civil War as a hobby. It's the only conference I go to where I see kids there who are members who aren't actually related to any of the people presenting. So it's a nice mix of people from with different interests and different focuses, and that's one of the things I really like about it.
For our viewers here who may not be aware, the Society of Civil War Historians just recently had their biennial meeting. in Lexington, Kentucky. And the next one will obviously be in 2014. And I was wondering if you might be able to share with us perhaps where that might be or thoughts on where it might be.
Yeah, we haven't finalized yet where the meeting will be. We liked having it in Lexington in that it was a smaller city, a place people hadn't been to. We did recognize, however, that a smaller city is also a city that is more expensive to get to. And so one of the things that we're looking at very closely as we decide where to have the 2014 meeting is a place with cheaper airfares that's served by a bigger airport. I know that the Richard Center sent out a survey, and one of the big questions, or a few of the questions in that survey, had to do with transportation versus cost of hotel rooms, and I think we're going to try to be very sensitive to transportation costs. We know it's tough for people, especially since we come at the end of the year and travel budgets are often used up. This tends to be a conference people are paying for themselves. So we want to try to keep it budget friendly. So we should know, I can't imagine that we won't have decided by our meeting in November when we have the Watson Brown Prize dinner. So
right, and for some of our viewers who may not be familiar, the Society of Civil War Historians does have a meeting every year at the Southern. Now as a dinner for the Watson Brown Book Prize Award. And this year, as it was announced in Lexington, the winner is Gary Gallagher's book, The Union War. So the Society does meet every year, even when we don't have our own organizational meeting, just for those who may be interested. Now, you are not just a president of an organization, but you obviously are also a teacher, and a very good one at that. And you had mentioned digital humanities as something that's near and dear to you. Obviously, with some of your work with things like the Valley of the Shadow Project, it's important to you. And I wonder, how do you see it fitting in moving forward into the world of Civil War history?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I don't think the answer... I don't think we've hit on one answer, and I don't think there's one way that digital projects can fit into Civil War history. I think there's a range of kinds of projects that people are doing, archives like the Valley of the Shadow, for example, or other large, I know Penn State, for example, is working on a big archive about the Northern Home Front. And then there are smaller projects that are more discreetly focused. I'm thinking maybe of Scott Nesbitt and Ed Ayer's work on emancipation and the mapping emancipation, which they're doing at the University of Richmond. I have a very small project on Sherman's March, and I'd love to see some way, maybe a kind of digital clearinghouse. I think these are all issues that people are really dealing with in the field of digital humanities, a way to kind of publish digital projects and have them vetted and there's a lot of people working towards this, and I'd love to see society be part of the conversation, even if it's as much as just a link, a page of links to digital work that people are doing. We also have a lot of bloggers in the society. Kevin Levin, Brooks Simpson, are just two that spring immediately to mind. And while there's a lot of conversation about the utility of blogs or not, they reach an audience that isn't necessarily being reached by our monographs, for example. And so I think it's important for the society to engage with that as well.
Do you mind sharing with us a little bit what you're doing with this Sherman Project?
Sure. In fact, I set aside my writing for today in order to do this interview.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
One of those days the writing goes slowly. I'm finishing up a book right now called Through the Heart of Dixie, Sherman's March in America, and it's about how Americans have remembered Sherman's March. So it's looking at the march from a kaleidoscope of perspectives. Veterans, Union veterans on the march, and civilians, African Americans, how has the march appeared in American culture, how travelers have retraced the march, all of that. So on the one hand, I'm writing a book. On the other hand, several years ago, I got fellowship support from the ACLS, the American Council of Learned Societies. And I've also gotten a lot of support from UMBC, from my own university. And I've built a small website that called Mapping Memory, which allows you to look at Sherman's March from a variety of perspectives. So I've been collaborating with visual artist, actually, an animator on it. It's a little stalled out right now, but you can see it at shermansmarch.org. And I'm hoping once I finish writing the book to get back to the website and have all of it. The book is going to come out in early 2014, and then also have the website finished up all in time for the anniversary of Sherman's March in 2014.
Well, and people obviously will be eagerly awaiting that. So early 2014, do you have a press lined up with that?
Yeah, it's with UNC Press.
UNC Press. One of our favorites here on the Civil War Monitor. Now, another hat that you wear is obviously you're also the director of the Historical Studies graduate program at UMBC. So I'm wondering, how do you approach discussing, broadly the Civil War era with your students? Is there a way when you are coming into a classroom, you're thinking about things like that, or history in general with your students? Are there certain things that you really like to stress?
Yeah, I think when I teach Civil War, which I teach to undergraduates and graduate students, I teach it every year. What I really try to do is cut through a lot of the romanticism, and I always tell my students, there's not going to be a lot of violin music and sepia tones, that I want them to unpack all of romanticism and all of the legends that have grown up around the Civil War, and try to get at not necessarily the reality of it, because I don't know that you can do that, but at least get at the grittiness of it, to talk about the death in the war. That, of course, I used to say 625,000, and now we think it's really closer to 750 or 800,000, which makes it sort of all the more horrible. And to let them really think about the Civil War as people, that these were people with virtues and flaws much like our own. That's what I really want to do with my students. And it's a subject with a real natural constituency. There are a lot of students who come into the class because they've loved the Civil War for years. And what I like to do is take that interest and take that excitement and lead it in different directions. So these students tend to be people who know the military history very, very well. Well, then I like to introduce them to the social history. I like to talk about Reconstruction. I spent several weeks on Reconstruction because I think it's really important that students understand it, even though, of course, that's the part of the story that nobody likes, because nobody wins Reconstruction. So those are the ways I try to approach it.
Yeah, and this is certainly, it's a theme. In talking with obviously several people on here, our viewers have seen with these interviews. I think there's a concerted effort here with the 150th to really bring out the realities of the war. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a general theme that you see with people when they're teaching, and again, trying to dissuade people from the romantic notions of the war. We're not trying to make it all doom and gloom, but it was a pretty horrible affair, and people need to actually realize that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it, to really emphasize the human cost. And I also have a lot of students at UMBC who have served in the military, and so they often bring a really interesting perspective, that you want your students to understand that a lot of what Civil War soldiers went through is not unlike what soldiers today are going through, and it's just the societal impact might be different, but that there's so much, what's the word I'm thinking for? There's so much kind of correlation that I think is important to highlight. And no, it's not all doom and gloom. I try to play to the lowest common denominator sometimes too. I do love also, I have students, every year I have at least one student who's a reenactor. I always have them come and bring all of their gear and show the other students. And one of the nice things about teaching right now during the 150th is there's so many more newspaper articles and museum exhibits and things like that, so that you can really, there's so many more opportunities for students to learn outside of the classroom, and I like to take advantage of that also.
Absolutely. And do you have a book as of late that's really grabbed your attention, something you might want to pass along to our readers? We're usually asking this of people that we interview, just to keep piling up the list of things on the bookshelf that people need to read.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I was thinking about this beforehand, and of recent books, I'm a big fan of Judy Giesberg's book, The Army at Home, which is about northern working class women in the war. And this is a population who we really have not studied before. They're often actually a population that people throw up their hands and say, oh, you can't study northern working class women because they didn't keep letters and diaries. And I think Professor Giesberg has written a beautiful book. It's just out in paperback finally, so I'm excited to assign it to my classes. I'm just now reading Kate Nelson's book, Ruined Nation, which is about the environmental impact of the Civil War, and I'm really enjoying that as well. And I've long used in classes Drew Faust's book, Republic of Suffering. I guess death and destruction, and it can never be down.
No, absolutely. You've got to roll that all in. And for our viewers, you've already hopefully seen Megan Kate Nelson's wonderful interview that she did with us. It's a phenomenal read. I can't recommend it enough. But Dr. Rubin, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope that you'll be able to join us again, perhaps when the book comes out, or maybe at the end of the 2 years, or maybe leading up to the next meeting, and we can chat about the next SCWH meeting. But in the interim, thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks a lot.